Welcome to the Jurassic Park cast, the Jurassic Park podcast where guests chat with me about Michael Crichton's 1990 novel Jurassic Park, and also not that too. This episode is a supercut on Cearadactylus and the Aviary that I've assembled from all my research and interviews with guests, offering all the pterosaur details from Jurassic Park in one fell swoop. Pun intended. So please let this serve as your one-stop source for all of Michael Crichton's terrific pterosaur particulars. In this collection are my interviews with Dr. David Hone, Phil Hore, Drs. Matt Borths and Adam Pritchard, and Dr. Darren Naish, as well as descriptions of Crichton's details regarding these terrifying pterosaurs and some synopses of the academic papers published on the snarled and sophisticated Cearadactylus. I'd also like to share a great appreciation for some artwork by Bernie Lay-woka-bessy and his incredibly detailed depiction of the cearadactyls attacking our heroes. Mr. Leiwakabessy's freelance artwork can be found under the portfolio named March 90 at march90.artstation.com. Let's start with a synopsis of how Crichton presents the cearadactyls to us way back in his 1990 novel Jurassic Park. Here's an excerpt from episode 49, The Aviary. The cearadactylus. There are 4 of these in the aviary. They're said to be big fish-eating pterosaurs in 278. They were put in the aviary before the lodge was finished to acclimate them to the area, but that was a mistake. They are, quote, fiercely territorial. They are nicknamed dactyls and referred to as a group of pterodactyls. Their attacks are impressive. They glide to the top of the aviary, fold up their wings, and dive. They're 30 pounds. They've knocked workmen unconscious with their dive bombs, cutting them up badly. They whistle to each other in 279. Grant sees these as huge and graceful, and also as, quote, flying dinosaurs. They were identified as Cearadactylus by Grant, known from the early Cretaceous period. They got 15-foot wingspans, furry bodies, and heads like crocodiles, and have a sour odor. They're known to be pescivores from Mexico and South America, and Grant presumes they're not dangerous. They make, quote, kind of a scream as they hurl downwards in their dives on 280, and they snatch up their prey with their claws, defecate on them with white streaks, and they can walk on all fours despite their arms being wings on 281. Dr. Alan Grant. Seeing that the Terratops Lodge is unfinished and boarded up, Grant is disappointed and gets everyone to head back to the raft on 278. Grant was also wondering why the pterosaurs weren't on the tour on 279, and getting suspicious, things aren't adding up. He identifies the cearadactyls when they swoop near, and he doesn't think that they have anything to worry about initially. But when the pterosaurs attack, he grabs the kids by the hands and flees with them, diving to the ground as the animals swoop over them. Grant's shirt is ripped by the pterosaur's claws on 280. That's pretty serious. In the next pass, the cearadactyls poop on them, and Grant drags them forward and escape. As one of the pterosaurs attacks Lex, Grant throws himself against the animal, knocking it off the girl and onto the ground on 280. And the pterosaur scratches at Grant's chest now that he has it pinned on the ground, and he can't see or hear anything but the shrieking animal. The cearadactyls are named dactyls and referred to as a group of pterodactyls. As a group, these animals are properly referred to as pterosaurs, which describes them as a family, not pterodactyls. Pterodactylus is a specific pterosaur, but not the name of the family. This is incorrect, and Crichton just didn't know any better. But the cearadactyls stick out for other reasons in the novel too, which I first brought up with my guest Dr. David Hone in episode 16, Malcolm. The cearadactylus were first described in 1985 and are the most, quote, contemporary animal, if that's the right word, in the park. So the cearadactyls are actually found in a southern latitude. There was all this question about whether all of the digs sponsored by the Hammond Foundation, why they were all northern digs and never a southern dig. But for some reason, the cearadactyls are known from Argentina or Brazil, South America nonetheless, not a northern latitude, certainly not a northern dig. So there's an inconsistency there. Either Bob Morris and the EPA was incorrect, or Crichton got confused and just put the wrong bird in here. Who knows? But, as far as you know, do the northern digs even matter? It was said full well in the Shore of the Inland Sea chapter when we meet Grant, the temperature is already 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And this is apparently a northern dig that the Hammond Foundation sponsors. So, how much hotter are these southern digs that fail to preserve DNA? Who knows, eh? To elaborate on this moment, let's revisit my chat with Dr. David Hone. Dr. Hone is a senior lecturer in zoology at Queen Mary, University of London, in the School of Biological and Chemical Sciences, and a paleontologist and writer whose research focuses on the behavior and ecology of dinosaurs and their flying relatives, the pterosaurs. He's written extensively online about paleontology and science outreach, blogs for the science pages of The Guardian, and regularly contributes for other media outlets as well as being a scientific consultant. But I want to go with the aviary, because that's what I want to talk about pterosaurs just a little bit. The Cearadactylus, is that as far as you know how to pronounce it?
Cearadactylus, I've got them down as, though he just calls them cearadactyls a lot of the time.
Yeah, he doesn't quite say it
But
right.
they're,
I looked it up. It sounds
yeah,
like they're Argentinian. They sounds like they might have been discovered in the early '80s, so they would have been kind of new when he was writing this the first draft of this book.
That's a fair point. I hadn't thought about the date aspect of them.
This might have been modern.
Quite a new animal.
Grant knows what they are as soon as he sees them, and it kind of bucks the trend because I looked into them. They're from Argentina, so this whole northern dig thing doesn't pan out in terms of where he got their cearadactyls, or cearadactyls. But I guess from your impression, you mentioned how they walk on their wings. That was good. They hang from the ceiling like bats. That was bad. The other parts, they had hairy bodies. They do pick up people. I don't think they pick up people, should they?
No. So they grab Lex's hat or her glove. I can't remember which it is, and they go and get dive bombed and scratched a bit, but I don't think anything worse happens to them. Cearadactyls, I'm pretty sure are not my branch of pterosaurs, but I'm pretty sure they're ornithochirids. Mm-hmm. So they're related to Ornithochirus and Hangera, and a bunch of these others. So relatively big animals. I mean, big Tropicnathus are like 8 meter wingspan, but a lot of these kinds of things are like 3 to 5. Long heads with often a crest at the end of the snout, top and bottom, and then quite a lot of teeth. And fish eaters, so mostly kind of fairly ocean going, at the bare minimum coastal animals. There are a few live inland, hunting in rivers and lakes and stuff. Furry bodies, all pterosaurs we think had that. That might have been not brand new, but Sordis, which is this little thing from Kazakhstan, and was the first pterosaur that we really reckon. It's one of those things. In hindsight, became obvious we had some others. Yeah. But it's the first pterosaur we recognised with a furry body and realised that actually this was probably pretty common among pterosaurs. So that was mid 70s. So again, given the timeline, relatively new idea. This is still kind of gaining traction. So his depiction of them is not too bad at all. I mean, he has them as powered flyers. He has them as active on the ground. There was, a lot of old ideas about them barely being able to walk and all the rest of it. And I wonder how much of that he pulled that. I'm trying to think of when did Jurassic Park the book actually come out? Was it
1990?
Was it 1990? Okay. So it does then postdate Bob Backer's famous dinosaur heresies. And in that, Backer says that pterosaurs are dinosaurs.
Oh,
he says they're a very odd early offshoot of dinosaurs. Now, he kind of cheated, because what he actually did is he didn't push pterosaurs into dinosaurs so much as, if you read carefully what he wrote, he dragged the definition of dinosaurs down until it was below pterosaurs, which is not, it's a bit of a, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a bit of a trick of the language. Mm-hmm. But he does specifically call pterosaurs dinosaurs. And so I don't think Crichton doesn't do anything like that, but it would give him some more ammunition for this idea that pterosaurs are hot-blooded dinosaur-like animals. So I wonder if that had an influence with that, which then feeds back into the hairiness.
If you could have picked a pterosaur to put in the novel, a pterosaur of your choice, what would it have been, and what would they have done?
Oh, that's a tricky question. So, I mean, in the book, I think it's a giant, dome kind of thing.
Yeah, that's the idea.
And one thing I did really, really like about Jurassic Park 3, the film, and I have quite a soft spot for that, is the Pteranodon Aviary, they basically got a chunk of cliff and then just put netting over the top and down the sides, which is a much better way of making an enclosed. So it's just infinitely cheaper and will look nicer. Yeah. Why the hell wouldn't you do that? Yeah, it's hard to say, because obviously he wanted something a bit different. He didn't want anything too threatening. They've had enough threats, and they've got the T-Rex and the Velociraptors to watch out for. You don't really want something that's instantly fatal, like Quetzalcoatlus, plus the plausibility of keeping that 10-meter wingspan. Where the hell did you put that? You just can't make it. We struggle to make aviaries for condors with 2-meter wingspans. You're not going to get it for that, 2 or 3. I think he picked the right kind of thing, in that you want something mid-sized that could be nasty enough. It would definitely leave some bumps and bruises. And so actually, they probably had the right idea with Dimorphodon in Jurassic World, though their Dimorphodon model is one of the worst depictions of any pterosaur ever. It's so utterly mangled and horrible and awful in just about every possible way. And anyone who thinks I'm exaggerating for comedic effect, no, it is absolutely dreadful and appalling and awful in almost every possible way. There is barely anything right about that model that wouldn't be fixed with a baseball bat and some severe flattening and reshaping.
Yeah.
Like, the hands are wrong, the wings are wrong, the head shape's wrong, the teeth are wrong, the eyes are wrong, the tail, legs, the feet, the claws. Like, it's all awful. But Dimorphodon, 2.5 meter wingspan, big head, lots of nasty teeth. We think it's a kind of generalized small predator. It might well get quite territorial and nasty, and it's have a decent bite on it, but you could probably also fight it off quite easily. We also think they're pretty good terrestrially and climbing and running around in trees.
Okay.
That would give it a bit more agility and jumping and flapping and coming out at you. That could work very well. In fact, it should have worked well in the last film, but of course it's just in the aviary with the pteranodons, and then they just immediately get out and don't do anything. So of course, completely wasted opportunity. And here we are moaning about Jurassic World. This is how every good discussion of dinosaurs ends up.
Well, that was a good answer, but that wasn't an answer we were looking for. The correct answer was the Canadian discovery, co-authored by yourself, the Cryodracon boreas would have...
Oh, you wanted Cryodracon?
Yeah,
sorry.
So you lost all your points.
Yeah. Pterosaurs. Galera. Yeah, that would have been quite a good animal. But again, if we're right, the max size is right up there with Quetzalcoatlus in the 10-meter wingspan range.
Just make the aviary
the
bigger.
Main animal we just... Sorry?
Just make the aviary bigger. It's all right.
Yeah, it's sizable.
Would they'd take your arms right off, eh? You're saying they'd be a little too fatal?
Yeah, I think they would. I mean, we'd probably be too big for them, but actually a 10-year-old kid, that might well be in the range of what they might go for. I mean, I wouldn't want to find out.
So to recap, Bacher's reference to pterosaurs as dinosaurs emboldens Crichton and Dr. Alan Grant and the admin at Jurassic Park to all refer to the pterosaurs as dinosaurs. So thank you to Dr. Hone for helping us contextualize why Crichton may have considered the pterosaurs dinosaurs. And he offers that Cearadactylus is a good pterosaur for Crichton's purposes in the novel. It's not too big, it's ugly and fearsome looking, but our heroes stand a good chance of surviving their attacks. They can be problematic and terrible, but not necessarily as lethal as Crichton might have attempted. And certainly as we saw in Jurassic World, for example. What does the academic literature tell us about cearadactyls? All right, in dinosaur news already. From September 1983, our first news story is Cearadactylus atrox, a new pterosauria from the Araripe Plateau, Ceará, Brazil. Published as an abstract in a book, and I won't bother trying to say this in Portuguese. It appears to be a book by the Ministry of Mining and Energy, the Department of National Mineral Production for Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. You can only imagine me trying to say that in Portuguese. Cearadactylus was named based on a skull with mandible identified to belong to the family Pterodactyloidea, originating from the early Cretaceous and was excavated from the Ramodo Formation, Portuguese. The name refers to the Brazilian state Ceará and combines with the Greek dactylos for finger, a reference to the wing finger of pterosaurs. The Latin atrox means frightful, a reference to the fearsome dentition in this species. It's believed to have had a pescivorous diet due to the kinked upper jaw and interlocking teeth, believed to be great for slippery fish. And you can remember we called it a subnarial gap or something like that when we were talking about Dilophosaurs earlier. This might have had something like that. There was much confusion as to what this shattered, excavated, and glued together animal looked like, and to which pterosaur family it belonged. It was many years later that our next news article was published, redescribing what Cearadactylus might have been. A redescription of Cearadactylus came from the paper Redescription of Cearadactylus at Atrox from the early Cretaceous Ramodo Formation of the Araripe Basin from Brazil, and that was published in January 2014. The paper notes that the specimen first described in 1983 caused disagreement among paleontologists because the skull was badly damaged. It was glued together. The two pieces may not have been from the same animal, let alone from the same species of animal, and so it was no wonder that it was considered to be everything from an ornithochirid to an indeterminate pterodactyloid to a... I can't even pronounce this. It starts with the letter C, T, and then E-N-O. So Ctenocasmatid, whatever that is. And where it wound up during the redescription, they came up with an anagnurid. So lots of easy words to say. As an anagnerid pterodactyloid, that would make it one of the latest surviving pterosaurs to actually possess teeth. And typically they had a premaxillary crest, though the animal lacks a crest. By 1991, the estimated wingspan was about 18 feet and maybe a little bit more than 30 pounds. So Crichton actually undersold his description of the cearadactylus in the novel a little bit. It's now believed that there was a crest, but it was on the animal's snout, not behind its head. Apparently the wrong bits were glued together. The fossil, you had to imagine, was in really bad shape. And so once they got it all figured out, they realized that the back of the skull was taped or glued to the front of the skull, or the wrong places. In any case, once they could identify the shape of the skull, they could figure where the crest was and finally start to piece where this thing fits into the family tree. And so Cearadactylus, a late surviving pterosaur with fearsome teeth, a modest 15-foot wingspan, and a crest on its snout was described. All right, interesting details, eh? Well, let's hear from my terrific guest from episode 49, The Aviary, Mr. Phil Hore. Mr. Hore is an author and contributor to Prehistoric Times magazine, and he's worked at the London Natural History Museum, the Field Museum, the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History, and also the National Dinosaur Museum in Australia, in case you were wondering which nation the national refers to in this case. So in this chapter, we don't get huge pterosaurs. When I had a special guest, Dr. David Hone, come on, and he does a lot of pterosaur stuff. He said that he liked the choice of the Cearadactylus because it was a good-sized animal. It could give you some trouble, but it wasn't going to put you on your butt and like rip you up. It was going to be problematic, but it wasn't going to be devastating to like a 7-year-old. It wasn't going to kill the heroes before they had a chance to escape. So he liked that it was a good choice for a pterosaur to get in there. So are you familiar with, like, from what I've discovered, it doesn't look like there was a lot to know about the Cearadactylus. It sounds like there was more of a history of, like, how it's been misinterpreted than there is what there is.
I was going to say, I was reading about the misinterpretation. That's quite interesting, and the change. This is what I do. I look for the history and the evidence. And if you look at the timing of when it was found and announced, just happened to be right when a certain Mr. Crichton was writing a book. So I think it must have been, he may have had other ideas, but that was in the news at the time. So I think he must have read something, because he would have been researching this stuff. And yeah, that was discovered and released around the time he was writing the book. So I just think it was the Spinosaurus of the time, when it was in the news. It was the new cool thing. And he just put it in the book going, well, I'll cash in a bit.
It is easily the most modern animal.
Follow that?
Yeah, the most modern animal by a long margin. I think everything was from the 1800s, the early 1900s, except for like Dilophosaurus was a little bit more modern, but still not contemporary.
Yep.
But yeah, the Cearadactylus was like published in the 80s, 85 or something like that. And then he would have been researching this book all that time before it was published and set in 1989. So yeah, it would have been a very modern idea to incorporate.
And again, when you go back into the history of Jurassic Park, it all starts with a movie script he originally wrote about a student at university dabbling with cloning and gets some pterosaur DNA. It's actually a pterosaur that he first tries to clone. And nobody liked the script. He didn't like the script. Nothing was going forward with the script. Everybody kept saying how much they hated the script. So he then changed it to like a kid going to the Jurassic Park and through the eyes of the kid. And he had a whole bunch of guys, I guess you'd call them beta readers today, reading all his versions of Jurassic Park, and they all hated it. And everybody hated it, and everybody was just so... And then finally one of them went, I'm not a kid. I don't want to read this book through the eyes of a kid. I want to read the book through the eyes of me. And that's when he did the new version of Jurassic Park and got a hit. So in 85 is probably when he was looking up pterosaurs and which pterosaur to use in his movie script. So there has to be some link between, the latest news being this species being discovered, and maybe that's what gave him the idea to write the original movie script, was the news of this new pterosaur being discovered. Who knows?
Well, I know that
he knew, I guess.
His beta readers that said watching this story unfold through the eyes of a child like Lex is unpalatable. I think they were correct, and we certainly get a taste of that for about 40 pages. and we can agree.
I remember reading the book, not getting too concerned with Lex and the kids. I went, oh, okay, we grew up with Steven Spielberg movies, so that kind of childlike view on an event's nothing new. But what's weird is, have you listened to the Jurassic Park audiobook?
No.
The guy who's doing the audiobook does not do her voice very well.
Okay.
And so she really becomes freaking annoying real quick.
I can only imagine.
Because it's just a bad voice. It's a bad vocalization. And you're just like, oh, dinosaurs, just eat her, will you, please?
Yeah. It would be a different story if that happened. But yeah, we might have... We would have felt better, more strongly with her if she were lost, as opposed to she survives. You're like, oh, she made it the whole way.
And as we know, there's so much fan fiction out there. There has to be some website with 100 different stories of the death of Lex and the death of Tim.
Maybe. So there's a couple of depictions that Crichton uses specifically in this chapter to describe the pterosaurs that don't exactly suggest that the beta readers knew what pterosaurs were, so to speak. So one of the first ones is that we have Grant, and Grant calls them, quote, flying dinosaurs. And in the animal tally, the list of dinosaurs includes the pterosaurs. They are, for all intents and purposes, it would appear, from Crichton's perspective, to be considered dinosaurs, which we know that they are a distant ancestor of or they share a common ancestor, but they are not dinosaurs themselves. When you're doing your work in museums and things like that, was it a common misconception? Does it exist still today that people get them confused as flying dinosaurs? Do you need to describe that the plesiosaurs are not swimming dinosaurs? Are these still common misunderstandings? Yeah,
and that still happens. Like Australia's Queensland, funnily enough, where I am, has just discovered, unearthed their first complete plesiosaur. Australia's only swimming dinosaur. So that stuff still happens all the time. I will say, not with kids, never with kids, and generally not with parents with kids, because the kids will put that parent straight real quick. So it's more of an older generation that grew up with that same kind of 60s, 70s, 80s. They're all the same thing, they're all a dinosaur. But yeah, like kids today, no, there's no, they know the difference, and they'll tell you the difference before you can even get out of your mouth.
So here's the
but they're not dinosaurs.
Right. So do you think Crichton knew the difference, or do you think that was a slip of his tongue that he has Alan Grant say that they are flying dinosaurs, or do you think he just didn't know any better?
I'm thinking he didn't know any better because he's not a paleontologist.
Yeah.
And as I said, I watched all the documentaries and I watched interviews and just to try and see if I could find any little nuggets about the aviary and the pterosaurs. And he very specifically says that normally he takes up to 10 years to write a book. Not the whole 10 years, but he'll be researching, he'll be looking stuff up, he'll be trying stuff, he'll be getting rid of it. But each book takes about 10 years, and that didn't really happen with Jurassic Park. He was working on the script wasn't working, he tried a version of the book and then another version of the book, and that worked. So he was not doing his normal, because he created ER, he created all these fantastic science fiction and medical dramas and things. So he's a very cool guy, he's clearly of the scientific bend. But in this interview, he clearly said that he did not put in the time that he normally would to research. So I'm thinking that's exactly what's happened. He was just like every person who basically didn't really work with dinosaurs thought they were dinosaurs and said they were dinosaurs. And I'm pretty sure very quickly he learned that mistake when people started pulling him up on it.
And I think it's true you make a good point. I don't believe that Crichton had any children. I think his first child was born either right around, like it was very young when he passed away. Like I can't recall all the details, but like he didn't raise
well,
a
he
lot
says,
of kids, yeah. So he
writing Jurassic Park, he kept buying dinosaurs for his brand new baby. So only just been born as he was kind of creating Jurassic Park.
Had he had a child earlier,
he hadn't got to that stage where you.
Yeah. Another part that comes up with the Cearadactylus is the mythology that all of the sites that Hammond's foundation was sponsoring were involved in northern digs. So way at the end of the book, this is like this question that finally gets answered by Dr. Marty Gutierrez as he's chatting with Alan Grant, and he says, quote, "Is that why Hammond Foundation supported northern digs? Because intact genetic material from dinosaurs was more likely to be recovered from cold climates?" And Grant supposes yes. And this is a question that was raised back on like page 30 by that guy from the EPA, Bob Morris. And so we know that just genetic material does not last. It doesn't fossilize. Apparently, there's the combination of what it takes for mineralization to enter into a fossil is the same thing that takes things like DNA out of a bone. So that was impossible. But in the mythology of the book, for some reason, northern latitudes meant that cooler temperatures, I guess, made it so that DNA could be extracted from these bones. However, the Cearadactylus represents an anomaly because while most of the dinosaurs that are discovered are from like North America, the Cearadactylus is from Argentina, and it's decidedly not from a northern latitude and is not part of a northern dig. So, do you think that they were just completely mistaken, or was this an oversight by Crichton? Do you think it was because he was adapting this new bird and just knew nothing about it?
No. I just say the first part's more of a generalization because the majority of the things are from the Northern Hemisphere.
Yeah.
And there is a bit in the Aviary chapter where they literally say, and we've had to get material from South America because they were talking about the pterosaurs. Mm-hmm. And so he knew that was from Brazil. He knew it was from because they literally say that there's just one very brief mention of it. It's not, I hadn't even thought of it until you just said it. And I went, oh, actually, I do recall because as I said, I just listened to the audio chapter and hated Lex the whole time. But yeah, they did say very specifically, just for one brief sentence, something about getting material from South America. I think he was going with the animals he had. You can't have, with the prehistoric times, I'm constantly being yelled at for the species I decide to write about in the magazine because they need that cover animal.
Yeah.
And they need a Tyrannosaur on the cover. The Tyrannosaurs sell. Put a Tyrannosaur on the cover of the magazine. So if you're writing a book about dinosaurs, or you're making a movie about dinosaurs, you got to have the big guns in there, or else you're not going to get your market. I think he was just being a science fiction writer at that point. And again, interviews clearly show he wasn't interested in the dinosaur side of things. He was interested because he's a doctor, a medical doctor. He was interested in the cloning side of things. And dinosaurs were just the end product of the cloning process that he thought would work in a great story. So it wasn't the dinosaurs, it was the cloning and all the science of the book and everything's all about the mathematics and the science side and the cloning side. Mm-hmm. So I think that was just an ends to the mean. These are the dinosaurs, if he went to his local museum, they're the dinosaurs you see in the museum. So he was just being a science fiction writer, covering his butt. But they do clearly mention something about South America, collecting the material for the pterosaur.
Interesting.
So, which again makes me think he was onto it. That was what got him into this story to begin with, was the pterosaur story for the movie script.
Mm-hmm. You make an excellent point that Crichton, throughout this, has appeared to be a guy that didn't grow up liking dinosaurs, isn't especially connected to them, but and some of these that shows in a couple ways. What it also proves is that he must have done a tremendous amount of research to get it as good as he got it. I mean, he didn't get it perfect, and the little things that he missed are kind of like, I don't want to say bonehead moves, but they stick out. But the stuff that he got good, the research shows. So there's something to say, hey, for a guy that didn't want to do a book on dinosaurs, he did an awesome book on dinosaurs.
Oh yeah, and that I think also proves to be true. Like if you're not a dinosaur fan and you didn't grow up knowing your dinosaurs, correcting your parents, reading everything, watching everything, which, let's face it, in the 70s and 80s there was nothing to see and watch. That's what would happen, is he's learnt it as quickly as he can, has expanded his knowledge as quickly as he can, and there are cracks because he's written about something that he doesn't know, not being a dinosaur fan or not talking to dinosaur people. You're going to get your ass kicked by saying that.
Well, he's very clear at the end.
Because it wasn't something he'd be aware that it would be a problem. He just was writing a story.
He's very clear at the end. He says, however, this book is entirely fiction and the views expressed here are my own, whatever factual errors exist in the text. So he owns up to it at the end. He knows it may not be perfect and he doesn't want anybody to take the blame but him. And good for him for that. The last thing that comes up, and I think this is a sin that most pterosaur most pterosaur depictions in fiction are victim to. It's the grasping talons that can lift somebody up off of the ground by the shoulders like they were a hawk or an eagle. And as far as I understand it, how you would describe a pterosaur's foot is plantigrade, that they have a flat foot, they walk around on it like you or I, and have the ability to grasp and lift something up off of the ground about equal to you or I. Does that translate to most pterosaurs, or is that fairly...
It seems to. Like, a good way of thinking about it is a bear.
Okay.
So bears are plantigrade and digitigrade when you think about it, because they've got clasping hands, but they are officially a four-legged animal, even though they can get around on two. And on their back hind legs are plantigrade. They work literally on the flat of their feet. They're like heel to toe, just dead flat. I don't think they can clasp anything with their back feet. Mm-hmm. But their front feet, they can, because they are digigrade. They can move their flex just like us, you know. So I think the best way to think of them is a bear. their front hands and things could probably manipulate quite a bit, and they would walk around on them, but it's their back feet that weren't doing much.
Mm-hmm. And then one of the things Crichton did that was either very forward thinking or he got lucky was, he didn't have the pterosaurs hanging upside down like a bat. Sometimes you would see that in the old days, but he had them walking around on all fours and specifically drew attention to it. Says, Lederer was right. They do walk on all fours, as if this were like an astonishing insight, and he was impressed and surprised by it. To which, at this day and age, this depiction of them kind of walking, I don't know, like a tarantula, kind of reaching and walking, is pretty cool depiction. And that was one that I don't know was being used in popular fiction before this.
That's really come through with fossil trackway discoveries as well.
Right.
Because it was all what was it? We don't know. We have literally no evidence. And you didn't really have working computers back then to digitize these things. You just had to kind of guess. But a lot of fossil trackways have been found with pterosaur trackways on them that clearly show they're doing something weird with their hands. And the way their feet are standing, there's only one way they can do that. So I think scientifically we're much better onto it. And I actually think there's a paleo artist called John Conway who I think he was just highlighted in the Prehistoric Times, which is weird because he's from Canberra. He used to work at the Dinosaur Museum he did all our murals and stuff. And as a kid, he was from Canberra, and he's now one of the big paleo artists in the world, and he headed over to Stanford and all these things, and I think that's one of the things he was helping them with was how did pterosaurs walk.
Oh, right on.
Yeah, so no, you're absolutely correct. And going back to Jurassic Park 3, if you haven't seen the pterosaur section for a while, they look freaking weird because they've given them the book feet, the clasping, because there's bits where they try and pick up people and fly away, and they actually do pick up someone. The guy who designed them came in, and I'm trying to think if it was one of the paleontologists who were helping them out, but somebody came in with a hawk video, catching prey and flying off with it. And they went, that's what you got to do. And so they've given them literally the bird, eagle, hawk, talon feet. And if you watch the movie, they stand out. They look weird because they're these massive, muscular, clawed, moving, clasping feet. And they just immediately don't look like the pterosaur feet that you see in fossils and things. So like the feet alone, you're like, oh my God, that's wrong. It just looks wrong. You can just tell it's wrong. It's wrong. Stop it.
So a great chat covering all kinds of details about those pesky pterosaurs, their grasping talons, their southern ecology, their dinosaurian classifications, and their fun and exciting walking posture. If choosing Cearadactyl was a contemporary choice because it was a newly described species, Crichton is lucky that it also turned out to be a really good choice for the book. Here are the thoughts of Dr. Adam Pritchard, supported by Dr. Matt Borths, from episode 30, Control. Dr. Borths is a curator for the Duke Lemure Center Museum of Natural History in North Carolina and the Lemure Center podcast, and Dr. Pritchard is assistant curator of paleontology at the Virginia Museum of Natural History.
And I think it's interesting that you mentioned Cearadactylus as an outlier. And I can almost imagine, like, God, I'm psychoanalyzing, the late man's, plotting and world building. But frankly, as much as like Pteranodon is the classic pterosaur. It's the classic big pterosaur. It's got it's got a 20+ foot wingspan. It's got the giant head crest, a completely toothless beak. The thing is amazing, but not. I've never thought of Pteranodon other than in Jurassic Park 3, where they turned it into kind of a monster freak, as a particularly threatening animal. Cearadactylus, without any modification, is freaky looking.
Okay.
You've got the scale of Pteranodon there, but you've got this mouth that, instead of a tapering toothless beak, is almost this broad, flat structure filled with these sharp snaggle teeth, crestless. It's I don't know, when I think of intimidating looking members of the pterosaurs, that's a solid choice. And obviously they're not exactly presented as like kind and gentle animals in the aviary section of the novel. So I wonder if that was part of that decision, because Pteranodon, I love Pteranodon, but boy, it just it does not look like something that's going to swoop down and cause you much harm.
People know they're not getting buzzed by herons.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I know that in the Cearadactylus, the scene, the aviary, that moment in the book isn't a very long one. They kind of drift in. They look to see if there's a phone. There's no phone. They get pooped on and bit and chased and picked up off the ground and everything, and they run away. They hardly are there, but it's, when you read the book, something that really, really sticks out. And then, of course, when they adapted it into the third film, I think a lot of people were like very, very pleased to say, yes, finally this moment is in there. Another great pterosaur specialist, Dr. Darren Naish, was a guest, and he offered some further fun details about cearadactyls and pterosaurs. Now, Dr. Darren Naish is a British paleontologist, author of many a book, including the Dinopedia published by Princeton, Ancient Sea Reptiles by Smithsonian Books, as well as a science communicator and founder of Tetrapod Zoology, a cryptid skeptic, and also the chief scientific consultant for Prehistoric Planet and Prehistoric Planet 2, now streaming on Apple TV+. I found a neat connection between the symposium that you wanted to go to and Jurassic Park. You ready for this? So
I know what it is, but do it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll see. Okay.
Does it involve the novel?
Yeah, the novel.
Yeah. So in the novel, there's the whole section in the aviary. I think they call it the birdcage, and the pterosaur there is Cearadactylus, which is named after Ceará State, which is where Crato in Brazil is, which is where I was meant to be going. Is that what you were thinking?
That's exactly it. There you go.
Yeah, it's always disappointing that, of course, they never, you when you're reading the book, you're wondering what's going to make it into the movie. Are they going to have this, and they did discuss it at one point, I understand. Obviously, it inspired the Aviary sequence in Jurassic Park 3, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So that must be based on that, yeah.
The other thing that was really strange about the Cearadactylus was that in the novel, there was this mystery. Why was John Hammond only funding northern digs? And it is explained in sort of a sloppy way that, because if you grind up fossils from northern digs, because they're northern, I guess that they preserve, because of temperature, some bits of DNA, so they were able to extract some DNA from the fossils from northern digs. But, of course, Cearadactylus is from the southern hemisphere entirely, so it doesn't make any sense. Plus, I mean, the whole matter is a non-starter, really, but they put it in there.
Yeah. Maybe they had discovered Cearadactylus DNA in a northern dig site, because an interesting thing about lots of these animals is, think of an animal like an albatross today. It doesn't just live in like one country, does it? They're sort of globally distributed. So I don't know. Maybe that's a get out clause. A thing that I've got to mention this as a pterosaur expert. Cearadactylus, the vision of this animal that Michael Crichton would have had in mind, that animal no longer exists. So Cearadactylus was imagined as this super long-jawed animal with this like strange kind of kink in the near the tip of the upper jaw, and then one of these fish grab things again, and that's how it was reconstructed. It turned out to be a composite. It turned out to be like more than one fossil cobbled together to make it look like that. and yeah, it didn't look. If they had reconstructed it for the film, they would have, produced a reconstruction that's no longer thought to be an animal that actually ever existed.
Well, they still put teeth in a pteranodon, so I mean, I don't think that get in the way of a good story, right?
That is very true. Yeah.
So it's entirely possible, and in fact likely, that big pterosaurs were no different from big birds of today, and they could easily have had a global or at least pan-continental geographic range. Just because a pterosaur fossil is uncovered in one hemisphere doesn't preclude it from having also lived almost anywhere else in the world too. And Dr. Naish also notes, what's understood about the cearadactyl's appearance is definitely compromised, thanks to the jumbled mess the holotype was named upon. We recall from the news section that the remains were misinterpreted and, for lack of a better word, restored inaccurately. It's interesting to note that the details that Crichton includes that are presently interpreted as inaccurate, the cearadactyl's appearance, its diagnosis as a dinosaur, and its inconsistency as a discovery from Argentina despite Hammond only investing in northern digs, I guess can all be further explained with a bit more context. Had Crichton relied on the literature of the day, the cearadactyl was based on a misinterpretation and restoration of the holotype according to Mr. Hore and Dr. Naish. Calling it a dinosaur may only be due to a liberal interpretation of the term dinosaur used by Bacher, according to Dr. Hone, and its geographic distribution was almost certainly broader than a singular southern locality, adds Dr. Naish. Seems all the details can be considered contentious, but nobody was, I guess, negligent, I don't think, in how it was written. Misunderstandings happen, and certainly, as time moves on, we can always broaden our understandings on a subject, like cearadactyls, like pterosaur. But we all seem to agree the Aviary was an exciting and truly memorable moment in the novel. And surprisingly, had Jurassic Park 3 adapted true cearadactyls instead of those toothy pteranodons, or had Jurassic World adapted true cearadactyls instead of the blasphemous dimorphodon models that Dr. Hone told us all about, we might have had an equally exciting and truly memorable moment in the films too. Moments which nobody would have complained about. Maybe. In any case, sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction. I have to give incredible thanks to all the guests who have appeared on the Jurassic Park cast. Thanks for tuning in to you as well. If you're enjoying these videos, I hope you like and follow along. There's lots more to come. Thank you dearly for tuning in to the Jurassic Park cast, the Jurassic Park podcast, where we talk about Michael Crichton's 1990 novel Jurassic Park. Until next time.